Why would a Muslim become a Christian? It's a good question. The Quran teaches about sin, just like the Bible. The Quran teaches that there's only one God, just like the Bible. The Quran teaches about heaven. It teaches about hell. It even teaches about Jesus being on the cross, just like the Bible. So again, I have to ask, why would a Muslim become a Christian? My name's Reese. I grew up as a Muslim. This is my story as to why I left Islam in the pursuit of Allah, not Jesus, Allah. I grew up in Algeria to a very devout Muslim family. My grandpa would pray 5 times a day. He gave alms. He observed Ramadan. My grandparents, especially my grandmother, were very adamant in teaching me how to read the Quran and how to understand the Quran. They would also allow me to participate in things with them that were part of the 5 pillars of Islam. This included reciting the Shahada. It included praying 5 times a day. It included giving alms. I never went to Mecca, but my grandparents would go to Mecca every single year as opposed to just once in their life. But the greatest thing that they taught me was to seek out what the Quran had to say for myself. Eventually, I moved to the United States with my parents, and I continued to be a Muslim because that's what I had held on to traditionally. As I grew older, I started to feel a deeper hunger to know more about the Quran. Let me share with you some of the fun things that the Quran teaches. Things about history, things about men and women, things about Allah and who He is. Let's start in Surah 18, verse 86. Till when he, the traveler Zul Qarnayn, reached the setting place of the sun, he found it going down into a muddy spring. The traveler here, Zul Qarnayn, is Alexander the Great. Apparently, he traveled so far west that he found where the sun sets. Now, we can argue that this is all just poetic writing, and that the Quran doesn't actually mean that he found where the literal sun sets and that it literally sets in a muddy spring. But there's more to this passage. Surah 18 is long, and I won't read the whole entire thing. But what Surah 18 suggests is that Alexander the Great was a Muslim. Historically, we know that that's not accurate because Alexander the Great lived some 1,000 years before the Prophet Muhammad did, and he himself was a Greek pagan. But that's okay. Let's read some more. How about Surah 2, verse 223? Your wives are a tilth for you. Go then into your tilth as you wish, whenever you like. This one doesn't need much explaining. Women are objects of sex. End of story. Oh, speaking of women, in the same chapter here, it states that a woman's testimony is half of that of a man's. Why? Well, according to the Quran, it's because of the deficiency in a woman's mind. So Allah not only created women to be objects of sex, but He also created them to be stupid. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Both the Quran and the Bible have a most influential figure. In the Quran, it's the Prophet Muhammad. In the Bible, it's Jesus Christ. These most influential figures act as the prime example of how their followers ought to live and act. So Muhammad is the prime example for all Muslims on how they ought to conduct themselves. And then Jesus Christ is the prime example for all Christians on how they ought to conduct themselves. So let's take a look at the difference between those two characters. So let's start in Surah 8, verse 12. I will cast terror into the hearts of those who disbelieve. This is Allah speaking to Muhammad. And then Allah gives Muhammad instructions for himself. Therefore, strike off their heads and strike off every fingertip of them. Surah 9, verse 5. Again, this is Allah speaking to Muhammad. Slay the unbelievers wherever you find them. Take them captives and besiege them and lie in wait for them in every ambush. Surah 66, verse 9. Again, Allah